Hi there guys, my name is Jacob and welcome to my channel. Now in today's video I want to talk to you about a simple concept, and that is living below your means. Now I know when I say that, a lot of people associate that with living frugally, going without things, being cheap, scrimping and saving, and it's for people that don't earn much money, living below your means. But really that is far from the truth. Living below your means is for everyone, because it doesn't matter whether you earn £20,000 a year, £100,000 a year, £1,000,000 a year. If you live month to month and choose to spend all the money that you earn every single month, then you're no better off at the end of that month than anybody else, because you've spent all the money you earned. If you choose to live below your means and spend a little less and have money left over at the end of the month to save, that means that you are getting ahead, and that even if you earn less than someone else, if they're spending all they earn and you're saving a little bit, you're going to end up better off than them. And this is kind of the concept that I've lived my life. I'm 32, but for my entire adult life, and to be honest, even into my childhood, this is something I've always done. And it was taught to me by my dad very, very young. Not something I've ever brought up on the channel before, but I don't have a good relationship with my dad. Well, to be honest, it's pretty non-existent. I haven't spoken to him in years, but I guess that's a story for another day. But as a child, I remember so distinctly him teaching me to live below my means. And he taught it me in the concept of pocket money. Now, obviously, when I was kind of below 10 years old, I got pocket money every week. And as a kid, you just want to go out and you want to spend it all. And I was just like any other kid. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I know at the time, I wanted Game Boy games. I wanted Pokemon cards, you name it, whatever was big at the end of the 90s. That's what I would have wanted to spend my money on. But my dad always instilled in me that no matter how much I got in pocket money or from a job, later in life, that you should always put a little bit aside every month. Now, whatever that number is obviously up to you. And some months you can put more aside, and obviously other months you might put only a little bit aside. But the main thing is that, no matter what you earn, no matter how big or small, you do not spend everything that you've got. And the reason for that is, the old concept of a rainy day. A rainy day will come, and if you've got nothing to get through that problem, that bad day, whatever happens, the car breaks down, the fridge dies, whatever problem that you can come up with, when that time comes, if you live month to month, year after year, you won't have any pot of money, any savings, any backup plan to fall back on. And that's when people get themselves in a mess with credit cards and, having to borrow money to get themselves through a problem. Living below your means will mean that, generally speaking, you will avoid those type of problems, because you will have a pot of money to fall back on. And as I say, this is something my dad taught me at a very, very young age. And, even though my relationship with my dad kind of soured, into my teenage years, and, as I said, we haven't spoken for many years now, what he taught me as a kid is instilled in me. And it's something that I do almost without even thinking about it. And I guess that's probably because he taught it me at such a young age. I remember him saying, if you look after the pennies, the pounds will look after themselves. And that is something I can even, in my mind, I can see him saying it to me. And at the time, you think, as a kid, you don't really understand what it means, or, you think, why does he keep telling me these things? But over time, and as I got older, it became so clear as to what he was teaching me. And that is that, even if you don't earn a big salary, and I've never earned a big salary, I've always been, probably on the lower end of incomes, really. I mean, up until just the last couple of years, I've managed to get to around a £40,000 salary, which, I'm very proud of. But up until then, I've been on around 30,000 or less. And that's for the majority of my working career so far. So, I've never earned a big salary, but I've always managed to live below my means and save money at the end of every month. And I don't honestly think there's a month gone by in my working career where I haven't saved even just a little bit of money. It's just instilled in me that on payday, when I get paid, I look at my bank account and I move a portion of that money into a savings account. And then I can decide what to do with it from there, whether I leave it in that savings account or choose to invest it in stocks and shares or whatnot. Maybe I'll even pay a little bit off the mortgage, different things like that. And obviously that's up to you, whatever you want to do with it. But the important thing is that you separate some of that money. So, as I said, you live below your means and that you do not spend everything that you earn. Now, going back, as I said, this is something that was kind of instilled in me from, my childhood, being 7, 8, 9 years old. It's been instilled in me. So it's not something that I find I have to think about all that much. But I know friends and family, even my partner, this is not something that was taught to them as a young age. And, in schools, they don't teach it either, which, to be honest, I find absolutely baffling that schools don't teach finance. But I guess that's a topic for another day. But yet most people, don't have these kind of financial skills and, lessons taught to them. And they go into life and they get a job and, they start earning good money and they suddenly realise that all the things they wanted as a kid are now accessible to them because they have the money. Now, whether that be, the latest mobile phone, whether that be, a brand new car that they've always wanted, whether that be holidays and travel or just fancy clothes, being fashionable, all these things become accessible to you when you've got the money and that you're earning a decent salary. And it's hard sometimes to kind of find a reason not to spend that money because you think, well, I've wanted these things for so long and I've got the money now. Why shouldn't I treat myself? Why shouldn't I have the latest something? Everybody else has got it. And it's those type of things that we kind of say to ourselves that I guess you have to rewire your brain slightly. And I think that's what my dad did to me, but as a young kid. So I never really had to rewire my brain. He almost wired it differently for me from being a child. And I've never really thought, even as an adult, I've never really wanted to be, I don't know what you call it, like keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, where you kind of chase those new things all the time and you want to copy what other people have because it's the latest trend. It's not something that I've ever fell into, but I see, so many people around me, friends and colleagues and whatnot. I see it's just so common, and that living below your means is very uncommon, which for me, I find hard to get my head around, but it's because I know it's how I was brought up. And I have to kind of tell myself sometimes, I guess 80, 90% of people are not brought up that way. And I guess financial literacy and stuff it's quite a foreign language to a lot of people. And, I'm by no means an expert, but I guess I have the basics and the foundations of it kind of instilled in me that even just, a concept like living below your means, it can feel difficult to people sometimes. And it's hard to understand, well, how do I do that? Because when you're living month to month, you genuinely believe that, you need to spend that money and that really there is no other way to live. Quite often you find people saying, well, if only I earned more money, I would save some money. But then that never really happens because once you get a pay rise or, a promotion, things like that, and you do earn more money, it's amazing, but you find a way to spend that extra money. And I think, I guess everybody's been there at some point. I mean, I know to some extent I have felt that before as well. When you get a promotion, you think, oh, I could have a newer car and different things like that. But it's important to kind of stick to your principles and not be, pulled in directions because maybe your friend's got a new car, maybe your colleague's got a new car, things like that. Those type of things, make you want to splash that money and be like everybody else. And, you know, societal pressure is a big thing on, I think, why people choose not to live below their means. I mean, life is expensive, let's be honest, and it can be difficult. But I always think, you know, it's something that you just have to tell yourself, and you have to kind of mold your life to fit the principle of like living below your means. And sometimes, yes, it does mean going without things that maybe you would like, or going without things that you see everybody else having. But ultimately, it's for the better, because, you know, as I say, when that bad day comes and you need that pot of cash to bail yourself out of a problem, you will have that. That person who's been living below their means for a long time will not worry about that bad day happening. They may not worry about losing their job or the car breaking down or something like that, because ultimately they know that they'll be okay. You know, they'll have a buffer. And, you know, if you lost your job, maybe you'll have a few months of savings, which is a buffer. And it doesn't mean that you don't worry or stress about the fact that you might have lost your job. But, you know, consider that, you know, compare that to somebody who has no savings and loses their job. Think of the stress level they're under compared to the individual who might have 3 to 6 months worth of savings that can tide them over whilst they look for a job, you know, and get themselves back on track. And it's only through living below your means where you can put yourself in a position where you're that person who has that buffer. And, you know, I am currently going through this at work right now. We're going through a period where my role and my team at work, we are at risk, as they say, and that is at risk of redundancy. And I hear people talk all the time. It's kind of the, you know, the only thing people really talk about at the moment is, you know, what will you do if we get made redundant? And, you know, do you want to stay in the industry and all these different things? But the main thing is money. And that is what people stress about. And people are obviously concerned that if we lost our jobs, yes, we'll get a little bit of redundancy. But obviously that comes down to how long you've been at the company for. But the main thing is that I've heard is that most people just live month to month and they don't have savings, even though they're all quite well paid, or at least in my opinion, you know, they're quite well paid. So I work the same job as them and have the same salary as them, and yet we choose individually to spend our money in completely different ways. And, you know, whereas I choose to save quite a big portion of my salary, they choose to spend it. And as I said, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not judging them for that. I'm sure they might judge me, you know, for the way I live as well, I guess. You know, I am known to be, I guess, like a frugal person and somebody who doesn't spend a lot. And that is just like a common thing that everybody laughs about and jokes about. But ultimately, it has set me up in life to a point where I don't really worry about financial stuff, or I guess as much as as the average person does. I can happily say that I do have a 6-month buffer of, you know, bills and expenses. So if the worst was to happen and I did lose my job, you know, I would be that person who doesn't have to worry about it as much as other people in my office. And that's something I'm really proud of, to be quite honest. It's something that I've worked hard at. It's not something anybody's ever given me. I've never had money given to me by family or friends or an inheritance or anything like that. It's something I've worked hard for, and it's something I believe everybody can do and put themselves in that position if they choose to live below their means. So I'm sorry if this video has seemed a little bit, you know, like I'm preaching, or whether I'm, you know, I don't know, whatever, but it's such an important concept that I feel like these days is not very common. And I think people, or more people at least, need to try and adopt this way of thinking and, you know, start reducing their expenses a little bit, maybe stop spending on clothes and flashy things, or, you know, maybe if you've got a car on finance or lease, maybe try and, you know, sort that out, whereas maybe you get a cheaper finance or buy a car in cash, different things like that. Just look at ways that you can kind of reduce your overall monthly expenses and start putting a little bit of money away every month. And you can start off by doing a really small amount. You know, it could be £20, £50, £100. But it's amazing once you start getting used to that money leaving. It's amazing how, you know, in a month or so's time, you'll find that, oh, actually, I could put a bit more than that now, and you can increase it and increase it. And before you know it, 12 months, 18 months down the line, you could be saving hundreds of pounds out your monthly salary. And like I said, 18 months before, you might have found that impossible to do. But once you start making these small changes to your life, you know, your lifestyle, your finances, things quickly snowball, and it becomes a habit, you know, wanting to save more money and naturally just saving money. But it all starts with living below your means. So I hope that makes sense to people, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below, are you someone who chooses to live below your means, or have you kind of learnt this lesson later in life through, you know, hardship and, you know, falling on hard times and thinking, you know, I need to change my ways, things like that. But I'd be really interested to know, because as I said before, you know, this is something I learned in, you know, my early childhood, and it set me up so well into adulthood. But I know for a fact it's not something most people are taught, and people generally learn it the hard way. But, you know, let me know in the comments anyway. I would be really interested to find out what you think. If you enjoyed this video, again, consider hitting the like button and the subscribe button. And guys, I'll catch you in the next one.